Right. Maud, do you have a plan? It's okay. It's okay to not have a plan. I had no idea when I graduated. And then it seems like you have all the time in the world and like you don't know what to do. And then like 2 months later you have no time. You're so busy and like so many things going on. So you just have to trust the flow and let things come in your way. I mean, I think it was, Maud was in my video class and something her video was about was like this feeling of preciousness about the friendship and kind of community you have at the undergrad, and you might feel like, oh, now I finally have my tribe, and like you have like real amazing friends and it's so precious and you're gonna miss it. And I told Maud in the class that yeah, you're gonna miss it. It's precious, but also you're gonna meet amazing people out in the world and you're gonna make professional contact. You're gonna make different kinds of community. So amazing things are waiting for you. So I don't feel so bad. And then the friends that you have now, like you're gonna keep them, so you're not gonna lose them. Yeah. Do you want to call attendance, Ethan?
I'm working on it right now.
Okay.
Nick, I got you. Elizabeth, I got you. Colin. Colin. Jeff Colin. Carl, I got you. William. Brett, I got you. Jacob, I got you. Kyla. Yorgos. Colleen. Don, I got you. Luke, I got you. Ron, I got you. Ben, I got you. Olivia, I got you. Matthew, and Olivia. That's
Okay. Yeah, there was some request about making video recording of the lectures and making it available for those who are late or not coming, so just recording it. It's good?
Watching my means recorded?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your quiz submission and also some ideas about the midterm that were really insightful, and thanks to Ethan for reviewing them. Today I want to talk about Tara McPherson's essay, UNIX and Mid-Century. I know that probably most of you read it already. How was that essay? This essay, operating system, US operating system mid-century?
It started out a little rough. I feel like you were just kind of thrown into the wolves, but as soon as you kept reading it, kind of developed the idea behind the article. It kind of got easier to go as you went on. And I'm a computer science major, so I kind of understood like Unix and
yeah.
the subtle references that were made, whereas I feel like other people that aren't as like well versed with it, they kind of flown over their heads.
Yeah, it's really rough in the first page or two, and then once you get idea what she's trying to do, it's like, oh, I see. Yeah, Colleen?
Yeah, I don't really understand all the software stuff, but after reading it, I can kind of understand the bigger picture, so that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the video, I watched the video, so I don't too.
Yeah, she wrote it for humanities scholars. So she is a professor of film and media studies at University of Southern California. She is not a computer scientist, but she approaches the CS as if it's a media or film. So although she does make a lot of references about computing specifics, I think it's meant for humanities students, scholars to understand. But it's really written at like graduate level or PhD level. So it's not a very friendly essay, just jump right into some of the core issues. Any other sort of initial feedback of the essay? Did anyone try to read it and were like, oh, I have no idea what she's talking about? And that's okay. I see some nodding heads. That's totally okay.
I think the first two fragments helped to kind of set it up for the poet. She explained it pretty clearly. And I never even heard of Unix, but
that's okay. Well, I'm glad you heard about Unix now. It's sort of what we're using now in most of our machines. Yeah, it's an academic text. It's written about 2008 or 9. There's two things that I want you to take away from the essay, and I'm going to talk about those two things primarily. And before I jump into the core message, I want to talk about the context of this essay. Is that I think she was frustrated with humanities scholar thinking about digital and technology without really understanding the technical details. And I think she was also frustrated with computer scientists who were making software for humanities and the world without really understanding the social fabric of what they're doing. I think her essay is a call for humanities to know more about CS and vice versa. So that's the easier part of why she wrote this. And the second part I'll talk about in depth with multiple images and historical references. The reason that I chose this essay for you in this class is that I think this is an excellent example of a rigorous scholarship that is talking about politics, but is not politicized, if that makes sense. So she's talking about racism, segregation, really tough questions, but she's not trying to sell us anything. She's just giving us theoretical tool to look at the lens, look at our world through the very sophisticated lens of computer science and humanities. Just thought that was a very excellent example of that. And I thought we spent like 4 or 5 weeks looking into AI, NFT, more contemporary example of computing, and also colonialism. But I just thought it's time to look into the mid-century America, the 1950s to 70s. And I say that with a lot of thought because I asked how old you are. I think most of you are born 2001 to 2005, right? In that range. So your parents are probably born in 1970, late 70s to early 80s, if I'm correct. Am I right? More or less? No? They're older or younger? Older? So they're born in like early 70s? Okay, early 70s. 63? So you're also a young baby in their family. Yeah, so, okay, so 60s or 70s, I would say. No one's parents born in the 80s? Okay, so I was wrong about that. Okay, so born in 60s and 70s. So they were born in 60s. So we're gonna talk about the era which they were born. So it was probably your grandparents' sort of time when they're young adults. So I think that periodization, that thinking about that time frame is really important because we're going to talk about 1950s to 70s and way back before that point. You were born in the early 2000s, so that was the time of the 9/11 and the war on terror. We want to look into how mid-century America symbolizes certain logic, that logic of modularity and that logic of segregation. This is the map of Detroit. Anyone been to Detroit before? Oh, you've been? You live there?
No, I've just been a couple times. Hockey, one of things.
Just visiting?
Yeah.
How was your impression of Detroit?
Well, the area that we were in was very like industrial because there was just a lot of warehouses and buildings, like hotels, because like we were only there staying for like weekends at a time.
Were you there for a show?
We were there for like hockey tournaments when I was younger.
Okay, hockey, yeah, sports. Yeah, it's very, I mean, Rust Belt in general is kind of similar, kind of post-industrial, empty lots, lots of built factories that are vacant, but Detroit is just shockingly vacant. And it's also very rigidly planned. It looks like somebody could see it from the satellite and it just drew out the map and then built the whole city. That scale is just really shocking. This is really the key of the essay that Tara McPherson wrote. By drawing analogies between shifting racial and political formations and emerging structures of digital computing in the late 60s, I'm not arguing that the programmers creating UNIX at Bell Labs and in Berkeley were consciously encoding new modes of racism and racial understanding into digital system. It's a two-part. So she's responding to this question of, are computers racist? But inherently. And she says, rather, I am highlighting the way in which the organization of information and capital in the 60s powerfully responds across many registers to the struggles of racial justice and democracy so categorized the US at the time. Many of these shifts were enacted in the name of liberalism, aimed at distancing the overt racism of the past, even as they contained and cordoned off progressive radicalism. The emergence of covert racism and its rhetoric of color blindness are not so much intentional as systemic. So this is a very complex and nuanced answer to this simple or this blunt question of are computers racist? And I think she's framing this 1950s and 60s as a moment of transformation in society as well as computing. And they respond to one another. They reflect one another. That makes sense, right? To everyone. So Unix. Who's a CS major or game dev major? Tons of people. Okay. So you probably programmed in Linux, went through the kernel to boot up some virtual machines. Kind of like, this is like your back alley of computing, right? You're kind of in and out all the time. So most people, non-CS majors, do not use Linux. We use Windows operating system or let's say Mac OS system, right? I want to ask the CS and game dev major, like, can you explain Unix to non-CS people? Like, what would you say if you're at a bar, your new friend, your date asks, what the hell is Unix? Like, how would you explain that to your non-CS person? Yeah, it's a hard question, right? Oh, Ethan?
I'm going to take a crack at it. Please, CS majors, game dev majors, tell me what's wrong. It's the operational system that serves the foundation that all modern OSs are based on. It's kind of the source code, the lower level coding that was constantly updated and iterated on.
That's correct. Yeah, it's like the grandfather of OS X, which is a Macintosh proprietary operating system that we all use. Like the backbone. Can anyone have something to add?
I mean, in one of my classes right now we're using Linux up there, but it's not so much as a coding language as it is like the thing that's responsible for executing the code that's provided from a separate language. Like we're using C in Linux, so we put all of the instructions into a different, language, and then it gets transformed into a computer language that Linux can then execute and run off based off of whatever you transform into that language.
Right. It's like a toolkit in which that you could write other software to run. Whereas like the OS X and Windows XP, Windows whatever is designed for human-computer interaction, for word processing, social media, etc., watching YouTube. It's not, Linux system is not really good at watching YouTube, but it's really good at writing a software that will continue forever. Or test multiple AI algorithms all at once and give you the result. So it's like a workhorse. It's really not user-friendly. It's just that, but it's very powerful. And it's also really resilient. So Windows machines are terrible at upgrade. So it's just Windows machine would run for a few years, but you need to constantly update. Same with Microsoft or the Mac OS. But Linux is really resilient. I've seen Linux machines that have been running for 35 years nonstop, and just was still running flawlessly. So very resilient. I want to show you what it looks like from our sort of the user's end. So in your Mac machine, everybody could go to terminal, and terminal is basically like a shell that we could use a Linux-like operating system within the Mac. So I was just like trying to look at my photo library. And what I just did is that I just did a cd as a dot dot, which is like a change directory, go one level up. So these are all the things that are in my desktop. So I actually opened up, this is where I'm at in my computer. So these are the subdirectories that I have, and you can actually print that out. So ls is a list, and I can actually go cd downloads. And these are all the things that I have. And these are all of your homeworks that I have downloaded over time. So it's just like navigating the machine without using graphic interfaces. That's a one simple thing. But you could do a lot more, like programming, making small things do, making computers to do repeated tasks kind of infinitely. So that's a Mac OS. I guess another thing that I would add about explaining Linux or Unix is that it was a largely open source, that it was created with voluntary effort of engineers, and they were kind of cultivating this culture of open source free software, which is very different from proprietary software that we use today. So although Mac is based on this thing, it's really building on top of tons of open source framework that other people have created. I mean, why are there so many variants of Linux or Unix? Anyone can answer that? Why are there like a million different species? Just because they can, and just because I think people have different needs. Some people are trying to build servers. Some people are trying to build elevators that have small computers. So there's different needs and different policy and philosophy. So the reds are the closed source. The blue are mixed shared source, and then the greens are open source, just entirely open source. I'm actually going to upload this slide to Canvas, and so you can go see. There was a really nice website by this computer history enthusiast who are trying to map out different history and influences of Unix systems. And you can actually see that it was a very interesting ecology. And just remember this image of a different ecology now, because I'm going to return to a similar image at the end of the lecture. But there are some significantly problematic issues of Linux or Unix. So those are a different thing. Linux is the most popular type of a Unix system. So it's just in my mouth, but I should really say Unix. There's this hierarchical approach that at the center there's hardware, there's Unix, different OS, and etc. And this kind of topology is essentially reflected into the system of Unix system as well. So these are the hierarchical approach of different directories and different pockets of where the computers do its work. And as Tara McPherson's essay goes, her problem with Unix systems is that these are segregated. So they don't really know what's happening in the other side of the computer. So in order for this part to go here, it needs to go up to the down, which is hierarchical. And that's very similar to how US government works. I'm sure you've learned this in your history or public policy class way back. But these different departments are segregated. And it's partitioned into ways that in order for one department to talk to another department, it needs to go all the way up and back. So there's a very little communication directly from one pocket to another. This is the US Armed Forces map, different structures of the Army. I'm just going to zoom into the Army, so you can actually see that different power structures are contained and they don't really talk to each other. So these are direct reporting units. These are Army services, components, and commands. That's Army commands. So to Tara McPherson's point that the social structure reflects computing structure and vice versa. And there's definitely a reason why these things are so hierarchical. Why would it be? Why is military shaped in this hierarchical tree structure? Why do you think this is the structure?
I feel like with the structure set up like this, it's very easy to receive orders and have them translate from one party to the next. And it makes it very organized so that you're not receiving mixed information.
True. Line of command and line of responsibility. So in order to trace who made a decision, it needs to be extremely rigid and hierarchical. It's also faster than decentralized democratic model because you can shoot a command from top to the bottom within seconds if it's approved. Scalability is another issue for it to grow. Any other reason why it's structured like this?
So I'm in a data structures and algorithms class for computer science, and it's really funny about different ways to organize data and stuff, and how it's much faster to have a tree versus just a row of 100 different separate units. So having a hierarchy is much faster to give commands from the top down versus different methods. So that's why like similar computing and something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hierarchy is faster than flat topography of equal powers, right? Any other thoughts? Yeah, so as always, we should go back to the 1600s and the European colonialism because it's just sort of the same thing. I think I showed this image earlier. This is the Dutch West India Company building out the ships for colonialism and trade, also military, and it shows the factory and also the line of command to the top of the bureaucratic level. So the success of the Western civilization is really based on this hierarchical growth and honoring that structure for military and trade and etc. So it's really ingrained into how we see the society and ourselves. Another periodic reminder about the Dutch West India Company and how they expanded to around the world and how that global empire was essentially built on top of this hierarchical structure. The public-private partnership between the corporations and the military were integral. So just another map of the Dutch colonial empire. You can see that they were just this tiny land here, but they had footprint all across the world. Yeah, especially this is really significant influence in the Southeast Asia. And how does that relate to art? This is the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, which is the National Museum of Art. Anyone been here or seen this? If you ever go to Netherlands, check it out. It's kind of impressive. But also, this architecture resembles the ships that they were building during this period. It's kind of a similar technology and aesthetic. So I think the architecture itself actually tells a lot about how they saw themselves, their role in the culture, and kind of the technology of the time. So if you look at the ships that they were building, the wooden structure, the kind of the labor that were involved, kind of the machinery that were involved, it's similar to what they were using to build these buildings. And these buildings are filled with artifacts and artwork from the Netherlands, but also around the world. So this is a really interesting painting because it just shows the Dutch colonialist, but it also shows this person who was a revolutionary figure in what is now Indonesia. So this person is a bit of a mythic figure, but they were seen as this kind of indigenous people who led the revolution within. So these paintings of the time tell a lot of the story about the social fabric of the past. So the Rijksacademy actually had an exhibition called Slavery, and it actually looked into their collection and the impact of colonialism and slavery around the world. So the artworks do tell the truth of the past as much as the fiction that they were trying to propagate. Just switching slightly to the French Empire. France is here, lots of footprint in Africa, also Vietnam and other parts of Southeast Asia, but also the US, which is what I want to talk about. So their empire was really significant. And I think you know that US, or the land that we live now, could have been a French-speaking country. It was very close, but it ended up in a different way where French sold the majority of the land to the United States. So this Louisiana Purchase is really the significant piece of history that shaped America as we know. I guess we're like right here. So how does that relate to segregation? This is the map of apartheid South Africa before sort of the decolonization. So these are the whites. These yellows are the whites. These are called colored, but it was actually not as populated, a rural area. These are the blacks. So the majority was actually black or colored, but the extreme minority of the white people ruled entire South Africa. This is more recent. I think this is 2020. It actually shows the Africans, or the black people, the colored people. White people are the minorities now, but they still hold a lot of wealth and power in the politics. But you can see the segregation changing slowly over time through decolonization. So that was South Africa, but we're coming back to Detroit. So this is black, the blue is black, yellow is Hispanic, the green, the tiny green is Asian, the white, the red is white people. So Detroit is shocking because it was actually a very prosperous, well-organized city, especially during kind of the boom of the motor industry. A lot of white people lived in the city center. So architecture used to be fantastic and kind of really a model city for American mid-century. But the decline of the motor industry and kind of the other social conflicts led to white flight, which is that white people all left to the suburbs. So the city center was left with the black folks. And it actually shows that the white people refused to integrate. So they were like, we will just move far away. Yeah, this is really like the key of Tara McPherson's essay, is that these systems of modularity leads. So this is Ford factory, kind of a prime example of modularity and mass production. In the heydays, Ford factory and automotive industry were employing both black and white workers. So it was not just the black workers. It was actually, there's a lot of issues with the Fordism and kind of the mass production, but it was an experimentation in integration of different workers. Yeah, I think this image is just really impressive, just so many people working there. I'm sure you heard about Fordism before, but just as a reminder, it's this idea that you don't rely on craftsmen of any single person. It's this idea that you decentralize the work, so one person does one thing really well, the other person does another thing, and then we just scale. That's how they're able to build these cars really efficiently at scale. These are some of the factories that exist today in Detroit, just huge, huge buildings, city blocks that are, have not been used for 30, 40 years. Kind of became an urban problem, so they're demolishing it. There are some really progressive vitalization of these spaces, making them to either living spaces or creative spaces, but the vast majority have been torn down or sitting in decay. I mean, I would really argue for this thing that Detroit is not dead. Like, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of amazing people doing good work, revitalizing the city, especially the black folks who have stayed and made it amazing. And there's also capital interest into that spaces. So Google has a huge campus there. Other tech companies, motor companies are coming back to Detroit. So it's not this urban decay. But what is decayed is the legacy of this Fordism and industrialization. Anyone can guess where this is? Kind of looks like the Ford factory, right? So this is called Fordlandia. It's in Brazil, deep in the Amazon. So Ford, this guy who made the company, is a really interesting kind of, he's kind of really tricky. But one of the ideas was that he thought he could actually replicate Detroit in Amazon. He thought, oh, it's working so well within our company, so we could actually export this entire city to Brazil. And because they were importing rubber from Brazil to make the tire, I was like, what if we just made the entire tire and entire car in South America and sold it there? Seems to work for our people, should work for Brazilian. So he bought a bunch of land in Amazon and basically exported entire city of Detroit to Amazon. It failed miserably. Like, it just did not work for many reasons. They were never profitable. They were trying to convert the indigenous people into this more of a Puritan work style. Ford was really rigid. He did not allow drinking or gambling or any kind of entertainment. So it was like you had to work 9 to 6 and you have to do all that. So it failed. So the entire enterprise was never profitable. They failed at exporting Fordism, but they did leave some legacy there. Let me pull that map out. So this is Fordlandia. So Fordlandia was never picked up, but we gotta look at Manaus, which is a city about 30 hours by driving, which is a deep Amazon, deep in the Amazon. So this is what the city looks like in the city center. But it's also known as like the worst type of pollution, because they have large factories for Samsung, Sony, other kinds of global outsource. So they produce a lot of stuff there. But it's also like they have a huge problem with trash, because people go there for cheap labor and production so that they make stuff. So the country and the city invest in kind of these outsourced labor, but they don't invest in recycling or kind of waste management. So these deep Amazon rivers are just polluted, out of control. And this is kind of a similar things happening in different parts of the global south, is that because of the cheap labor, global corporates go there, but it's not beneficiary for the local government to invest in the infrastructure, so it kind of circles into this perpetual exploitation of labor and natural resources. Okay, so this is a kind of a, he's no longer in power. Sarkozy used to be French president. So I bring this up because I think this is really fascinating part about how the West sees itself. basically, when Sarkozy went to Dakar and addressed to the nation about sort of reconciling with the history of colonialism, he said, yeah, it was bad that French colonized your country, your entire continent, but it's actually not our fault that you guys have corrupt government. It's not our fault that your environment is messed up. It's not our fault that you have this huge disparity of wealth. It's your problem. So you can't blame France for that. So that was entirely his message of this speech. So that's sort of how the West sees itself, is that the problems of the Global South is their problem, not something that we have created. But I think you can see that I think it's different. I think it's definitely the corrupt government of their country is not entirely the French problem, but it's definitely a product of certain colonialism legacy. And I think this part really kind of upset people, where Sarkozy said that the tragedy of Africa is that the African man has not entered history enough. He never rushes towards future. So basically saying that Africa is still behind and it's their problem. Okay, so I think you get the idea of my kind of unpacking of McPherson's essay and how that's related to computing and culture and the environment. I want to leave you in a more brighter note, thinking about society that is not based on this Fordist hierarchical model. This is a drawing by Santiago Ramon Cajal, who was I think he was the first person who really understood the synapses of our brain. So he was drawing how our synaptic structures work way before kind of modern technology. This is a long time ago. Human mind works in a really interesting way that is not strictly hierarchical. It works in a synaptic way where there's a plasticity of kind of neurons and structures that learn, shape, give shape to others, and then respond to the environment, if that makes sense. So this plasticity is really the key. It's the idea of like giving form and receiving form. So it's not either a strict order and respond, but it's like more a collaborative way. So these synaptic structures reflect us, and perhaps our society could reflect this kind of structures too. Another approach is like mushrooms. Mushrooms are really interesting because they have this underground and visible networks that we don't really know that they're responding to. Mushrooms are communicating with each other and kind of like spreading in ways that is not very hierarchical. It's more rhizomatic. It's more spread out. And they kind of like seem to disappear but kind of rise back up again. And they have a more resilient structure than other kinds of plantation. So I think there's something to learn about how mushrooms survive. And perhaps that could be an organizational structure that we could have. So, any thoughts or questions so far?
I'm a little bit confused about the drawing on the brain connections. Sort of how this was drawn and what more like a modern representation of that looks like.
It's actually like really close to the sort of the modern scientific rendering, which is why people kind of come back to it. Is that he, Cajal Rahman.
How was this studied? How did he?
So he was just really good at making these microscopes. And he was a draftsman, so that he was able to draw really accurately. So this is what his office looked like. He was more into optics first, and then he used the optical inventions to trace sort of synaptic structures. And there are definitely things that he got wrong, but sort of the mechanics of how brain works was accurate. So the scientists today are returning to that to see what he got right and what he got wrong.
No, I think the answer.
Yeah, nowadays they have. I mean, I think Ramon Casal was not able to get to this like a neurotransmitter level, but I think he was able to get the synaptic level, tracing how the muscles in the brain were reacting. Any other questions? Okay, so hopefully that answers some of the questions about the reading. And just I'm waiting for your submission for the proposal for the midterm. I read some of it, and my general response was that, can you make it more you? I want to hear more of you in this paper, because like a lot of you are really good at researching and kind of coming up with analytical, logical approach, but it's missing you. Like, why do you need to write this? What is your voice? I'm really curious about what you think. So even if you have submitted, use this time to maybe rethink, reshape, make it more personal, make it more compelling. And let's see, culture. Okay, so unless there's any question, I'm gonna let you work on the submission. That's due 1 p.m. today. On Wednesday, we are just gonna meet. I'm just gonna give you feedback to the class, to individual presentation. So we'll do that. And then Ethan will be here next week, Monday and Wednesday.
This Friday.
Yeah, this Friday as well. We'll announce that to help you with more of the research and design elements of things. And the goal is that I want you to present to the class. Like, you're going to be here using the microphone, there will be camera, you'll be in my place. So just think about that as an entire package of the midterm. And yeah, again, like it's really important to use this midterm paper as at least part of the reference, some of the themes of modularity or kind of segregation. All right, I'll let you go. Thank you.